Hey everyone. So a couple of months ago, me and KP released a video on the basics of mental health. You know, we're like dispelling several rumors about mental illness and depression and the like, and just generally giving basic information on the subject. This is a follow-up video to that, answering just a couple of questions that came up in the comments of that video rather frequently, and that we felt probably needed to be addressed so that you guys just don't go and take the bad advice that was being given to you in the comment section. Some of these are going to be repeats of what we said in that video, but I mean, welcome to my audience. They need things explained like 17 fucking times. Anyway, no fanfare, just away we go.
I can't afford therapy and my insurance won't cover it. Do you have any advice for this? What resources are available?
If you can't afford therapy, my recommendations are a couple of things. A, look into a family member's insurance. There might be some sort of clause where you can get on their insurance, maybe someone who has money, and get your therapy covered under that. There might still be about a $30 copay from my experience, but that is an option. Another option as well is to look into some mental health apps. A lot of apps are free, and depending on what you need, you can probably get some kind of help without actually going to a therapist, but obviously therapy is the best option.
Depending on what your specific needs are, BetterHelp might be your best option. It's an online therapy service designed to make counseling more accessible and affordable. It's not intended for every kind of issue, though. I went to BetterHelp looking for counseling after I was raped, and they told me that this was outside their wheelhouse and I'd have to go to conventional therapy. They will assess you individually, but just be warned that as a budget service, you kind of get what you pay for.
I personally recommend 7 Cups, and there's a bunch of AI systems that can help you track your mood and other things, so you always have someone to talk to and get some insight about how you're feeling, and hopefully you can get some advice about how to deal with what you're feeling. But feel free to look in the App Store and see what might work for you. There's a whole bunch of things from meditation, to the apps I recommended, to group chats where people with similar issues might come together and talk about how they're feeling. These are all free and a great way for you to get some help potentially, if this is the only option.
My parents don't take my mental health concerns seriously. What do you recommend?
I may not be the best person to ask, as my solutions tend to be the ones that people have to be like willing to do, but if you've tried convincing them and it's failed, there really is no other option than yelling. Parents who are stubborn and basing their opinions off ignorant views tend to require a very firm hand to get them to budge. If you really need therapy that badly, you may need to start getting angry with them and pushing back hard against their behavior. Bad parents are predictable, and they tend to disregard their child's psychological well-being until it starts to be a consistent inconvenience for them personally. One common mistake young people often make is to assume that if their parents aren't being convinced, then that means they aren't making their case properly. In reality, the reason is more likely that they're being stubborn and would rather pretend that there isn't a problem. Remember, it's unwise to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. If convincing them fails to work twice, stop trying to convince them and start making it a problem they can't ignore.
I recommend sitting down with either a counselor and some other professional, or some other kind of professional like that, someone who your parents will both respect, and then all 3 of you can have a group discussion about options and, you know, what to look into. I imagine other peer members in your life want to help you, ideally, and the more you can get to justify how you're feeling, probably the better. I imagine there still might be people that resist that, but unfortunately there's probably not much you can do until you're 18, but that's my best advice as far as that.
How do I know if I'm depressed or just having a bad day?
If you can pinpoint a reason you're feeling sad, lethargic, or unwilling to get important things done, then it might just be a bad day. A key sign of depression is when the answer to the question, what do you have to be depressed about, is nothing. If you're having a bad day and can specifically point out why it's bad, then you're probably fine. But remember that days aren't bad for no reason. People don't just have bad days. A bad day is when bad things are happening, not just when you're feeling down.
If you're depressed, it's chronic, which means it happens over for a week or 2 where you're consistently in a bad mood. If you're just having a bad day, I still recommend some of these mental health techniques to hopefully help curb your mood, or at least help maintain it a little bit. But you know, depression usually lasts around 2 weeks or so, or longer, depending on how you're feeling, or you might have a depressive disorder, which is a thing too. So look into all that, do your research, do your homework, I trust you.
General advice for gender dysphoria?
Transition. That's really it. Everyone has different levels of dysphoria and transition to different depths. Some people feel better when they're on hormones and that's it. Some people don't transition at all and feel better when the right name and pronouns are used. Some have to go all the way. But dysphoria generally means that something needs to be done.
General advice for PTSD? How do I know if I have it?
So for PTSD, there's a couple of things I would recommend. The first thing is brain spotting and some more advanced kind of therapies. Talk therapy can only get you so far, but rewiring your brain to help you cognate stresses differently will help you in the long term. So look up brain spotting or EMDR. Those are the things I recommend, or talk to your therapist. See if they're qualified to do that. If not, you might need to find a new therapist. Sorry. You have PTSD as if after a long period of a hardship, depending on what it is, be it military service is the most common one, or a car crash, or even a long-term form of abuse. The symptoms of distress and flight or flight don't go away. It's just harder for you to kind of get through it and regain functionality. Each person is different depending on how they act for certain stressors, but those are the general guidelines for PTSD. Again, you gotta go to the psychiatrist and get medically documented and all that fun stuff, but there's a general thing of if you might have PTSD. Usually the rule is 3 to 4 months of non-improvement as far as witnessing a traumatic event.
I can't tell if I have a brain problem or a mind problem. How do I figure it out?
There isn't actually a difference between the two. Your brain only works in one way, and the idea that something like psychosis, where your senses are literally glitching out, and something like depression, where one emotion dominates the others, is somehow fundamentally different is an incorrect assumption people make to convince themselves that everything's fine and that they don't need to do anything.
A lot of things depend on how you perceive things is the best advice I can give you as far as that one. You know, I've always been pretty easy to distinguish between what is actually traumatic and what is actually going on in my head versus just how I feel in that moment, if that makes any sense. But again, talk to your counselor, talk to a therapist. There's also online therapy sessions, which aren't the same thing, but you can usually get them for a reduced rate. So that's an option too if you can't afford therapy.
How do I get diagnosed with a mental disorder?
Psychiatrist.
Again, just talk to your therapist or talk to your friends or talk to someone you trust with these issues. Usually a professional is preferred, ideally, and just get some feedback about what's been going on in your day and potentially see if it's long-term. I think the biggest thing to look out for is if it's prolonged or it's just your personality or it's just something else.
If I don't have much meaning or purpose in my life, how might my emotional pain be related to that?
Your emotional pain will probably just be dealing with the not knowing your form of purpose, I suppose.
This is a massive sign that you need to talk to a psychiatrist and not YouTube creators on the internet. Remember, we speak from experience to help direct you guys to where you need to go, but we can't be a stand-in for actual professional help.
My advice is try to get a hobby, try to expand what you like to do and just see how that goes. Usually that's why people volunteer or they, take care of foster animals and see if that helps improve your mood and how your outlook is going, generally.
We aren't your therapists, we're just the ones you ask for directions.
How do I conceptualize good mental health? What am I actually aiming for?
Good mental health in a general sense is basically being able to have resources to access if you're not feeling great, or mostly having people to talk to, vents. Basically, I'm not explaining this very well. My interpretation is having things in place so if something does go wrong or if there is issues, then you have someone to talk to. You have specific resources that you can go to make sure that your mood is not infecting your overall life, whether that be professional or your personal life. Being sure to talk and talk your issues out is like the best advice I can give you, I guess.
Being content, functional, able to get out of bed in the morning, thinking positively about yourself, eating right, keeping your house clean, getting decent grades in school, like B- and stuff like that, being able to function as a normal human being, you want to be doing okay in life and be able to handle momentary lapses and being okay without the world ending.
At what point should I be hospitalized for my mental health?
You should probably be hospitalized if you're losing functionality in your daily life due to some of your mental health concerns. So usually if you can't eat or if you can't sleep for long periods of time or, you can't drive or just basic things like that, then you probably need to be hospitalized, but
Suicide, self-harm of any kind, or general feelings of hopelessness, as it can often lead to the previous two. At the end of the day, a mental health professional will be the one to determine whether or not you need to be hospitalized, and the decision will ultimately be up to them. You can't make that final decision yourself. If you think you need to be hospitalized in some way, go to the hospital and find out.
It's not scary, just find a good facility with good reviews. That's my best recommendation. Don't just choose something to go to because odds are you might not like it and it might not be as helpful as you would like. Just have that in the back of your mind in case you do need to go somewhere.
It's perfectly fine to go to the hospital and say, I'm feeling suicidal and I don't know what to do. They will guide you from there.
Just be confident in the fact that you're doing this for you and you're helping yourself get better.